A very warm welcome to this session, this being the second session in our series on emotional intelligence. I am Charity, and as I have always said, it's a great joy and a great pleasure to meet with us on these platforms, to share a couple of thoughts and lessons that I have learned over the years as a coach, as a trainer, as a mentor, and of course, as I pilgrim this journey of life. The thing is, I want to bring out my light, and I encourage you to bring out your light. And as we all bring out our lights, then become that great light that this world truly does require. So let's dive into the conversation in this particular session. Emotional intelligence, the platform for sustained success. Emotional intelligence, the platform for sustained success. Many of us are seeking success, and indeed we work very hard to be successful, whatever your definition of success is. But many times, so many are not able to sustain that success. And one of the main contributing factors is a lack of emotional intelligence. And to help us understand exactly what I am saying, we're going to look at the life and times of three great men who I want to believe at one point or another we have read about. The first man is Saul, King Saul. King Saul was the first king of the nation of Israel. And he did not, go to the polls to be king. He was actually handpicked. And we are told physically, he was tall, he was handsome. So if we were to go by the outward, look, he seemed fit, perfect fit for the position of king. But when we look at the life of Saul, we will realize that he had a few gray areas as far as this conversation of emotional intelligence is concerned. And so we're going to look at I'm going to use four examples as we look at his life to help us see what we are saying. Number one, Saul was given leadership because God trusted him with leadership. But Saul was a man whose anger was easily kindled. He's a man who got angry quickly or speedily. He was quick to anger. Now, as a new king, after he had been installed king, he decides to go back to his farm to till his land. Allow me to pause just right there before we, get a little bit deeper. As king, as a new king, shouldn't he have been consolidating his troops and his army so that they can fight off the enemies that had been bothering them for years? Anyway, on one of those evenings when Saul is coming from his farm, he finds the people weeping. He does not know what is happening. After all, he has been in the farm. But remember, he's already installed as king. And he inquires to find out why the people are weeping and crying so loudly. And he's told that the Ammonites have been around and they've wreaked havoc. And it is recorded that his anger was kindled greatly. It's important to know those words, greatly. And what does he do? There is nothing wrong with getting angry. We all get angry, do we not? But then Look at how he responds to that emotion. He takes his oxen, breaks it into pieces, small pieces, and sends a piece to each and every household and says, whoever does not follow Saul and Samuel, this is what is going to happen to his oxen. What is that? A threat? Intimidation? Which brings me to my first question. Are you a leader who intimidates people? Are you a leader who threatens people so that they can follow you, so that they can do what you want? Are you a leader when people think about you, they dread your presence? Why? Because when you get angry, you're a terror. Anyway, the people followed Saul and they went on to fight their enemies. What should Saul have done? Suppose instead of intimidating and threatening his people, suppose he had just taken time to consolidate an army and train an army and then go and fight off the Ammonites. Emotional intelligence. The second thing I want us to see about Saul, he's a man that is very impatient. On another occasion, he's told by Samuel, wait until the evening, and I will come and make the evening sacrifice. Now, to understand why this is so important, there was an order of doing things. The priest was to make the offerings on behalf of the people, and the king was to be king. So Samuel delays, or rather, he comes at the 11th hour, if we would say. But when Saul is with his troops and he realizes, oh, Samuel is not coming, he begins to get anxious. He begins to get afraid. What does he do? He forces himself to make the sacrifice against the order, against the law, against the protocols. And when he's making that sacrifice, he does not even stop to think about the consequences of his actions. And when Samuel comes and asks him, what have you done? You've done a foolish thing. What does Saul do? He gives an excuse for his action. He says, I saw that the people were scattering. I saw that things were not working, and I decided to do what he did. Which brings me to the second question. Are you a leader when things are not working? You get impatient. When things are not working, you get anxious. When things are not working, you get afraid and you allow anxiety and fear to move you to take action against order, against the law, against the protocols. Are you the kind of leader who, when you're anxious, who, when you're afraid, you take action without thinking about the consequences of your actions? Are you the kind of leader, after you have taken action based on what you feel or based on your fears, when you are questioned, you don't take responsibility. You begin to give excuses. What would Saul have done? He would have waited. He would have observed the order and the protocols. He would have taken responsibility. Let me use an example close by to us. If today you were at a function and you are the master of ceremony and the guest was the president, would you go ahead, and the president was delaying or was getting late, would you go ahead and start the function without the president? Or would you patiently wait until Mr. President has arrived? I think we all know the answer to that question. Emotional intelligence. The third thing I want us to see about this great man, Saul. On another incident, he was to go and fight the Amalekites. with his troops, with the army. And the instructions were, go and destroy everything. Everything. Even the cat. Destroy. And so he goes into battle with his great army. What does he do? He destroys some and keeps some for himself. And when, again, Samuel asks him, why did you do what you did? He said, well, we saw that some were good and we would use them to, use for an offering unto the Lord. And, of course, it was a foolish thing to do because he had not followed instructions. A man who easily covets. Coveting is an emotion. You see something you like. You want to keep it for yourself against the law. It's something that has brought a lot of corruption in our day and age. Why? Leaders. You're put in leadership. You're seeing all the goodies that come with leadership. You're seeing all the possibilities. And what do? You covet. And then what do? You keep some for yourself against the law, against the instructions. Disobedience. Which brings me to my third question. Are you a leader who covets what is not yours? Are you a leader, though entrusted to lead people? You are the one that is teaching them to be corrupt. Coveting is an outcome of corruption. Or is it vice versa? Well, it is led by something called greed. What would Saul have done? Follow the instructions, keep the law, and just do what is right. Finally, the fourth thing that I want us to see about this great man, Saul. Remember, we are talking about emotional intelligence. When they went out to meet with the Philistines, again, another enemy, powerful enemy, there was a young man called David who showed up. And David was a nobody. He was just a boy who had just come from taking care of his father's sheep. And anyway, David kills Goliath. And after David has killed Goliath, the women begin to celebrate. The women thing, eh? And they begin to sing a song. 1,000 for Saul, 10,000 for David. Saul gets jealous. An emotion. Do we not all get jealous at a given point in our lives? You see, somebody who is under you, looking like they are better than you, or maybe they look more intelligent, or maybe more educated than you, something, and you're jealous. Or a colleague. It doesn't even have to be somebody, who is under you, or a colleague. Maybe even a junior who is jealous of their leader. We all get jealous at a given point. Anyway, how he responds is what is important to this conversation. Saul begins to get threatened by David, and then he begins to plot how to kill David. And for the rest of his life, it becomes an obsession. He is pursuing David, even rallying a whole army just to pursue one man. It became an obsession. And this whole thing eroded his confidence as king. Remember, David he was a great warrior. Indeed, he was. But because Saul allowed his emotion to drive him, his jealousy, his obsession to drive him, he lived in dread, in fearful dread of David. And that obsession led him to do unthinkable things. It made him insecure. It eroded him of his confidence as a king. Which brings me to my fourth question. Are you a person or a leader who is driven by jealousy? Are you driven by your insecurities? Are you driven by obsessions for particular things, such that those obsessions drive you to do the unthinkable? What should Saul have done? Suppose he had called in David and, made him his commander of the army. Suppose he had called David in and, come up with an alliance. They would have been a better team together. But he was driven by his emotions, emotional intelligence. Now, when we look at the life of Saul, his end was tragic. A man who was lacking in emotional intelligence. He lost his kingdom, his successes, though he had a few good successes, but those successes were not sustained. Emotional intelligence. In our next session, we will look at another king, David.